Across the UK, on DAB digital radio, on the free Times Radio app, and via your smart speaker, this is Times Radio.
And it's 18 minutes past 5. Good morning. The Times leads with city figures backing Labour with a call for a new outlook. It is wording that really will not be warm words to the Conservatives this morning. Business leaders said it was time for a new outlook so Britain can break free from a decade of economic stagnation. It's this letter that's been written to the Times. It's, signed by past and present executives from JP Morgan, Heathrow, Aston Martin, JB Sports, Iceland. You can imagine we'll look at that in the business news in a bit more detail in about half an hour's time. The other big sort of meaty piece of election news today is over pensions, and the Express put it as, I'm on your side. The Prime Minister pledges a bumper pension rise. The Telegraph says the Prime Minister says state pensions will never be taxed. And the Mail puts it as 4 in 10. They're talking about what's happening in private education if a Labour government is elected. 4 in 10 to quit private school under Keir's tax. Well, we were talking to Bridget Phillipson on the Shadow Education Secretary on Times Radio yesterday. She sort of seemed to suggest that private schools had mismanaged their fundings if they couldn't afford this. So lots to get into today. Joining me to do that, Andrew Eborn, barrister, broadcaster, the president of Octopus TV. Andrew, good morning.
Good morning, Rosie. Always a delight to join you.
So, who is delighted today is Rachel Reeves, I'm sure, with this endorsement. Tell me what you make of it, what the business leaders have had to say.
Oh, well, I'll tell you what, they've been trying to do this for a long time, haven't they? Basically, as you say, it's a list of the great and the good and the unwashed of the business world. JP Morgan, Heathrow, Aston Martin, JD Sports, even Sir Jimmy Wales, the founder of Wikipedia, and Tom Kerridge have come out and signed this wonderful letter to the Times. And this is a lot of lobbying's been going on for a long time by Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, and Sir Keir Starmer. What they want to try and do is position Labour as the party of business before the general election. So they will be whooping over their cornflakes and croissant this morning once they see this letter. So fantastic stuff.
Well, fantastic for them. Terrible for the Tories.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, it is terrible for the Tories. And you've got to work out, well, what's the response going to be? Because hopefully, OK, they've got 120 signatures. Hopefully, if the Tories are clever, they'll get 130 tomorrow from other people who will turn around and endorse them. As good, the wonderful George Galloway puts it at the moment, it's basically two cheeks of the same backside. And I think if you look at the policies of both, well, they've got that division. And I think I was one of the few people who wasn't surprised by a July the 4th announcement, because, as I said beforehand, Rishi was always going to try and look for some movement on his 5 pledges. And when inflation, the easiest one of the 5 pledges of all, when it's 11% and it went down to 2.3%, that was a moment to sort of trigger it. So no surprises there as to recalling the election, but you're going to find lots of people over the next few days coming out, all sorts of headlines saying this person's supporting that and so on and so forth.
I know. Well, the thing is, endorsement from business can be really helpful in a campaign because you can, splash that, use other people's words complimenting you, and it looks like the gift has been given there to the Labour Party, and you may very well say deservingly. We'll get into that in a little bit more. The Eye this morning, Andrew, says there's sort of a warning from Labour mayors who say they're ready to stand up to Keir Starmer on housing, transport and council funding. To what extent might there be a little bit of discontent brewing there?
Oh, yes, I think absolutely. They're waving their swords and saying, hang about, we've got our power, we're directly elected mayors, and we're going to make sure that the things which are relevant to us are front and centre. All but one, as you will know, you're surprised if you remember who it is, all but one are sort of Labour or thereabouts. It's the Tees Valley Combined Authority have a Conservative mayor directly elected. But that's what they're saying. Look, they're sort of turning around and saying, OK, we want to make sure that he's expecting robust conversations with the regional leaders, and they cannot expect to get everything they want. So it's fighting talk even before he's in position.
I know, that is tricky, isn't it? Because you would expect so much of the conversation, the chatter we have around, local governments is that it gets very confusing as to who to lay the blame, whether it's the government or the local authority, particularly when they are opposed. It's going to be more complicated if you've got a Labour government and Labour mayors and things are going wrong.
Oh, no, absolutely hilarious. So what the Tories should do, they should turn it round and say, look, hang about, we'll give a better deal to the Labour mayors than Starmer would. And then you can have that publication in the Times tomorrow. We had not just 120, but we had all the different mayors and all of their supporters as well. It's going to be a very interesting discussion.
I also think for the mayors, they want to stop the sort of Westminster dominance of politics and say, look, we really need to stand up for exactly what we were elected to do. So, saying they're going to challenge Starmer for better deals. I think if you live in those areas, you'll think, yes, our men, please do exactly that.
Absolutely. I think you have both a day mayor and a night mayor. It's going to be interesting.
Private schools. This
Yes.
is going to be really interesting. And it's one of those highly contentious topics because you're either deeply invested in the fees that you'll be paying, or you think, I couldn't care two hoots about how much money you've got and how much less you'll have if you've got to pay increased fees. The Mail say 4 in 10 to quit private schools under Keir's tax. I mean, for parents, it's almost nearly half of them, the paper is suggesting, are going to say, look, I can't afford this. They won't be going. You may have less sympathy in that situation. You may think, there's now going to be an influx of pupils onto state schools who maybe won't be quite at this point prepared to cope with that.
No, you're absolutely right. And I was talking, I get invited every now and again to go and speak at my old school and give out prizes and things like that, Lord Wandsworth College. And they were saying it's an absolute nightmare. So put it in perspective. If it's a day-only private school, the average is £14,940 per school year at the moment. And if it's a boarding school, it's a whopping £35,289. So the extra money they're going to have to pay, 20% on the 14 grand or 15 grand is another 3 grand. And on 35 grand is 7 grand. Now, this is on post-tax money that people are earning. They're going to have to earn more than 50, 60 grand just to pay school fees. And the knock-on effect when parents are sort of scraping to try and send them to private schools is just too much. So there's going to be a massive pressure. And again, this is the point that the Times makes in the brilliant article. There's going to be a massive pressure now on state schools where they're going to have this sudden influx, if it happens, with people who are going to come who previously might have gone privately, but now have to switch over to the state schools.
Yeah, and it's how prepared they are. We were asking Bridget Phillipson, the Labour's Shadow Education Secretary, about exactly that yesterday. Do you think it's the right decision? Labour Party, Andrew, will say, look, we're going to use that money to better fund our state education.
Well, you have to turn around and say, well, will they do it? What's the net result going to be? It's rather like when you have low taxation, you get more money in as a result rather than high taxation when people have all these tax plans and so on and so forth, or they go abroad and everything else. It's about the net result. And the ears on the ground, and as I say, I've been talking to a number of private schools, which we know, the ear on the ground is going to have a massive impact. And actually, you might get the net result when fewer people go to these private schools as a result. So I do think it's tricky. I think everybody's entitled to a great education in the same way as everybody's entitled to great health and so on and so forth. But the reality is, I think this is going to be a really crippling thing for certain schools. And I understand some have already closed in anticipation. I know one, I talked about my Lord Wandsworth College beforehand, a local school to them has just closed because they just can't afford to run. This will kill some of them.
If the policy goes through, Keir Starmer said it will happen immediately if they're elected. So we'll see what happens come the 4th of July, how much that will swap people's votes. Let's talk about something else. Ambulance staff, there's that 8 o'clock in the morning. I don't know what your GP is like. A dread to dial. Sometimes you think, oh my gosh, how am I going to get through? There's been a trial where ambulance staff, obviously they've got very well-staffed, extremely efficient call centres, are helping GP practices answer the phones at 8 o'clock in the morning. You imagine they'd be very good at the job, but should they have to do it?
Oh, I think, well, it's interesting. It's better to have some solution. No, they shouldn't is the short answer. And if there were an efficient system, we could make that make sense. And I've managed to go at least 2 sentences without mentioning AI, but artificial intelligence and robots and so on and so forth, but with real human voices could assist with this. In the meantime, whilst we're waiting for a sensible solution, getting ambulance call handlers to step in is better than having nobody at all. And so under the pilot scheme, 80% of patients calling in the GP practice for a same-day appointment are diverted to a hub of 20 call handlers employed by the London Ambulance Service, and they're based about 15 miles away in Barking in East London, for example. So I think that the short answer is it is a problem. This is one solution, but it's a short-term fix, I think. think there's a wider issue that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, I mean, they said sometimes patients would have been on hold for half an hour before getting through. That might be more like 5 minutes. So that's definitely made a difference to those people on hold. The story on the other side of the paper, page 5 of the Times, the stolen artefacts from the British Museum. The investigation's still going on as to exactly how that happened. The FBI are now investigating because we know that the suspicion is this was an inside job. What are the FBI actually looking at?
Well, they're looking at all of that sort of side, and a name has been put in. I won't repeat the name because innocent until proven guilty, and it might be a civil action. But basically, there's 1,500 objects were allegedly stolen by this person who's been named and sold on eBay of all places. And what I find extraordinary is the incredibly cheap price of some of these things. For example, something in May 2016, there's an antiques dealer in New Orleans bought amethyst gem from this particular person for 42 quid. It sounds like a bargain. And there was an orange scarab beetle for only 170 quid. It is absolutely shocking. It will all unpack in the appropriate ways. But as I say, it's rather a bit worrying because the name's been bandied around. And I always say everybody's innocent until proven guilty. So I won't repeat the name, but it is an extraordinary story. Lots of artifacts stolen and put on eBay, which people are snapping up.
Yeah, well, just incredible. George Osborne, who's chairman of the British Museum, has apologised for failing to investigate the warnings that was made because this one guy was saying, look, I really have noticed that this stuff's gone missing. I'm spotting it online. It just took far too long for the British Museum to actually sort of join the dots together and say, right, let's work out. And why don't we have a proper system of logging all the things that are in the museum?
Yeah.
Final thing, Andrew, inside the Times. First up, it was the Garrick Club.
Yes.
Let women join the Fisherman Club. Now that the Garrick is off the hook, the question being posed by the paper is, will the 140-year-old Fly Fishers Club change its ways? Should it?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Well, this is the place, as they say, hitting rock bottom and all the usual sort of gags, chip off the old block. The Garrick Club, as you say, they now allow women in, and I think hopefully Judi Dench will be the very first person there. The Magic Circle, which I belong to, and the brilliant magicians club around the world, we let women in, and quite rightly so, in 1991. I think absolutely we should have that sort of side. Why on earth you can't? Have to probably maybe change the name, but the Fisher Club, I think, is glorious. They should let women in, and I think that everything will be enhanced appropriately. And actually, it's a very sort of solitary activities. And I don't know if you've ever fished yourself, Rosie. Have you?
I have. I'm not patient enough.
Let me recommend mackerel fishing, because I did that. Used to go down to Lyme Regis where my father was based, and I got about 8 mackerel, I kid you not, in about 10 minutes. If you go to the right place, it's the most satisfying way of doing fishing. But no, fishing, it seems to be solitary. You seem to sit there, but I presume in this club, you all go and get together and chat about one, and just what the enormous one that got away. So I think it would only be enhanced by having female members.
Andrew, thank you so much. Andrew Eborn, barrister, broadcaster, president of Octopus TV, going through the papers. I have done mackerel fishing in Lyme Regis. The biggest challenge in Lyme Regis is not how many fish you will catch. It will be dodging the seagulls. I lost an ice cream to a seagull in Lyme Regis, and then I'd made homemade pizza the night before, took it out of a little foil wrapper on the beach, and then I disappeared behind, I think, about 8 seagulls. And all that was left of my lovely homemade pizza was a tiny bit of basil on the pebbles. It was very sad and genuinely actually a little bit frightening. So that would be my top tip if you're going to Lyme Regis this summer. Don't take your pizza to the beach.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.